Welcome everybody to the Guys and Dolls Show. I'm your host, Monnette. The visual aspect of any production is probably the most important thing for the audience to pay attention to. The sets and the costumes are the reason why you get sucked into the world. And everyone knows that this is the most important thing to do when setting up around later of the production. This includes getting the costumes ready and getting the world ready. That includes the sets. I talked to both of the directors around this, and this is what they had to say.
I'm Brad Kessler. I'm in charge of the set design and set construction for the all-school musical. Every year is different. We never, Mr. Kiefer and Mrs. Durham, they never repeat anything, even with the sets. With Mr. Kiefer, he likes a large platform, so that took quite a while to build a double stage on top. We've got some flats that are 16 feet tall, which creates a little bit of difficulty. After doing it for so many years, it's become easier for the simple reason that Mr. Kiefer and Mrs. Durham, they communicate very well with me. I'm starting to learn their language. If they want things to be sharp, I know what they're talking about. If they want me to dull it down, I know what they're talking about. If they want it to look cartoonish. So I'm getting a really good feel for the communication with them to make the whole set building easier. Well, my seniors, I have both juniors and seniors working on it, and my seniors have done it once before, so they have a pretty good idea what I want. It's kind of difficult for the juniors because set building is totally different than like residential building as far as building things lightweight, mobile, and knowing what the audience is actually going to see.
Oh, that's too long.
Well, the contrast is not difficult to change modes and create something like that. I like the fact that it goes back and forth and it's not all real colorful or it's not all down and gloomy. Sometimes we have a lot of flats that are flown in on the pipes, and sometimes we just have a lot of props that are set up. Well, normally, this year was a little late. Normally we start the sets right at the beginning of December, and we didn't start them this year until after we got back from winter break, which put a little bit of pressure on. But still, the communication has made it quicker and easier.
Sets are very important to the visual spectrum, but it's not the only important piece. Costumes are also a very important piece. What the character wears shows the audience who is the character. And we have nothing more than Mrs. Hayes to thank for. And this is what she had to say.
I'm Dana Hayes, and I'm in charge of the costuming. Mr. Kiefer was looking for very bright, snappy costumes. That's what his description was to me. So try to look for things that are going to be snappy, bright, look colorful. He was looking for very colorful. So that's kind of how we went with costumes. So like our men's suits, some of the men's suits are very bright, maybe even slightly brighter than they would have been during that time period, but you're going for a look. Les Mis was more like peasants type clothes, and didn't necessarily have to be all that neat because during that time frame people didn't have a lot of money for clothes. Then you jump to for Guys and Dolls, that is important. That's part of what makes their character is their costume. It's great because I work with the same group of people and we know each other and we trust each other in what our decisions are, and sometimes we don't even really have to ask each other. We just kind of know what if we are questioning something, we know what the decision would be, so we just go ahead and take care of it. This year is a lot less sewing on my part. Last year was very, very heavy sewing. I was almost overwhelmed with the sewing. This year it's much less and has been an easier year for me. But every production's different, and what's necessary for every production is different. So it just depends on what play we do as to how much I actually put time into it. I don't want it to sound like I don't put time into it, because when you measure 103 people for costumes, that's a lot. That's a lot of work. It took me 2 weeks to get that done, after school and when kids were there and then having to find kids. So yeah, that's a lot of work.
Well, as far as, yeah, I love, Mr. Kiefer has a keen eye for bright, large colors. When he describes to me that he wants large props, he means large props. He wants it blown out of the water. And Guys and Dolls have these set up in there. And the colors, the music, I think it's going to be fantastic.
Mr. Kessler knows that this is probably one of the better musicals to do. It is taking place in the 1950s, and Mrs. Hayes also knows the same way. They both know how to create this new world for the audience, and that is probably the best thing you can do for the audience in the visual spectrum. Next episode, we're going to be talking about the tech. That's right, everything around the wires and the lights and the sound all goes through the tech, the final piece. Until then, this is Monnette saying, see ya later.